Why were you laughing, by the way? For the camera.
If you had a choice between two options,
Mic check, 1, 2, 3.
one, perfectly healthy body, no money,
Episode 8.
and two,
Poor health, chronic problems, but all the money you could ever ask. Here we come.
which is a question we will attempt to answer throughout this discussion, expressing our opinions on the value of money.
And I suppose there are two other options, which are perfect health and all the money in the world. Or, which is most common, not that much money and
Poor health.
Poor health, yeah. So, without getting into the depressing fourth option, let's just jump right into this. I have some questions for you, Jacob, and let's start with the opener. What basically is more important, financial wealth or physical health?
So imagine your bucket list. Do you have one? Do you have one?
I do not.
I happen to have one because I was told to make one a few years ago. And as I was writing down all these items like paragliding, skydiving, bungee jumping from a cliff, doing charity work, setting up my own company, helping people, traveling the world to places where you only see in photos of National Geographic, being financially independent. Now, being financially independent wasn't exactly on my bucket list, but in order to do all the other aforementioned things, money is somewhat of a requirement. But notice that money is not a goal. How many of you have the item of, I want to be a billionaire, or I want to win the lottery on your bucket list? So if I had to choose between health and money, I would choose health. So I would rather be a very healthy person with little to no money, because with my healthy body, I'm pretty sure I can learn a skill or do whatever it takes to make up for the financial deficit. But if I have poor health, some people might argue if you have all the money in the world, you can pay to replace your organs, you can pay for a better body, receive treatment, but that is not guaranteed. As advanced as it is now, modern medical science is not that advanced just yet. So there is a limit to what you can do with money to your health, and imagine the days you were sick in bed and unable to walk around. How many of you actually felt the same level of excitement when your team won the game, or the same level of exhilaration when you heard happy news from someone that you cared about? So without health, you can't enjoy the abundance of that the unlimited money provides you.
Yeah, there's a lot of evidence actually. As you spoke, I thought about North Koreans, of all people, from the testimonies of defectors who've come and spoken of typical life in North Korea, which is a mystery to anyone outside of it. They say that although they have very limited resources, including electricity, internet, things that first world people take for granted, they're happy. They live a simple life. This is true in countries around the world that are considered developing, or even third world countries. Tend to be more agrarian. They tend to be more smaller communities, family-based, independent of modern conveniences, but yet, ironically, the modern burdens, And conversely, I mean, it's so well documented that you see people who are celebrities or other wealthy individuals who are just miserable in Korea, committing suicide, what have you, those in positions of power and prestige, wealthy in many different ways, I guess, in the eyes of society, yet very unhappy. Okay, so that there's evidence to me outside of just our own experiences. You mentioned bucket list. It's a pretty simple bucket list. It's not so much things to do on Earth, but I often do think about the end of my life, and being Christian, I believe that I'm going to face my Maker, and He's going to ask me for an account of my life. Now, it's scary to think of that because, of course, your first thing your mind runs to is all the time wasted and all the opportunities squandered and things that
all the times you hurt someone.
Regret. Yeah, all the sins, which thank God, are forgiven in Christ. But it's still a mystery to me because in heaven, I know that there's still a judgment, all right, and an accounting to be made. So, in the Bible, it talks about the parable where the master says, "Well done, good and faithful servant." Those are the words. I guess that's the bucket list. Is I'm hoping that when I die, I'll hear those words. And for me, to hear them, I think a lot of it just comes down to, did I, with the time I had, with the energy I had, with the resources like money that I had, use them properly? Did I have my priorities straight?
So in other words, your bucket list is well dying.
Good point. It's like the movie. What movie was it? Every man dies, but not every man truly lives. What is that? Last of the Mohicans? You've heard that line, right?
I've heard it, yeah, several times.
Yeah. So we're all gonna die. I guess that's a different line. That's well living, but yeah, well dying. Well put. Let's jump into habits. Okay? Practical spending habits. You've helped me in this regard. You told me about your ABC system. But for anyone else who doesn't know, is it fair to say that we are, at best, middle-class residents of first world countries? So relative to the world, we're rich. But within our immediate circle, our country,
yeah.
We're definitely not rich.
We're probably somewhere on the average or below average.
Yeah.
So middle class for sure.
Having put that disclaimer out there, what would be your practical spending tips, habits, strategies, methods, etc.?
The reason why we're having this discussion is because we're both learning as we go, and which is also the purpose of this channel. And I can't tell you that I have things figured out. I myself have little to nothing saved up. There's a long way for me to go in terms of getting financially secure. The thing is, though, practice and theory are always two different things, and in theory, I can say all the right things. Now, the ABC bookkeeping, I've also learned it from the ears in the financial investment sector. Every time you keep your books, you categorize your spendings into A, B, and C. Items in the A category are things that you cannot live without. The category B are things that you can live without, but life does become a little difficult. The C categories are things that you can live without, things that are considered luxury. So for example, your daily meals, the price of food that you pay for lunch and dinner, they can go into A category. The cost of transition, the cost of the subway fee to work, they can go into the A category. Things that will go into the B category could be, depending on your preference or depending on your life pattern, coffee can be either considered B or C. Now, people think that they cannot function without coffee, and it might be true for many people. Truth is, you won't die without coffee, so it's definitely not A. But for certain people, you might have difficulty focusing on your work without coffee. So that can be categorized as B. But if you're having coffee just for the sake of it, just for the taste of it, it can be anything like having a soda or going out for that extra expensive drink, even though water can suffice. If you're a smoker, cigarettes can be considered C, because yes, if you're addicted to it, it's really difficult to quit. The truth is, cigarettes do not make your life easier. It's only an illusion. So cigarettes are definitely C. I'm not saying that you should never do anything that falls into the C category, but if you categorize the A, B's, and C's in your life, it'll be easier for you to plan your finances responsibly, and in the event that you need to make some cutbacks or make some adjustments, it'll be easier to just cut out the C's rather than go through the whole list of expenditures and then choose from that long list of things. Now, when you categorize your expenditures through ABC, you must be strict to yourself and reasonable and realistic, meaning that for some people, maybe taking a subway or the bus is not an option to work. And just because you don't have public transportation to from your home to your workplace, you can't be forced to walk 4 hours every day. In which case, yes, driving might be the realistic choice, in which case driving, the cost of gas, might fall into the A category. You can't live without it. But if you're living in a major city like Seoul, pretty much wherever you go, there's public transportation. If I can get to my office fine with just the right kind of planning by taking the bus or the subway, but one day I choose to take a taxi and end up paying 10 times as much as I would have paid for the subway or the bus, then on that day, the taxi did take me to work, So it might feel required, but it's actually a luxury that could have been saved if I were more careful with the planning or a little more diligent in waking up. So no matter how difficult it is to admit, that taxi trip to work that day falls under the C category as unnecessary. Now, also in terms of food, if say a $3 to $4 meal at a local diner might have sufficed both nutrition-wise and portion-wise for a sufficient lunch that wouldn't have been too unhealthy for me, but instead I chose to go to a family restaurant and indulge in all those items, expensive items there, and had a really satisfying lunch. Yes, it was a happy moment for me, so I'm not saying you shouldn't do it, but what I'm saying is it was overkill for lunch. So in that case, normally lunch would go under A, but in that case it could go into C or B, because it wasn't necessary to spend $30 for lunch when I could have been more than happy with 10.
Well, I want to respond to your ABC thing, because food is the necessity, of course, but within that category of food, this is a personal confession. I got to say, there's a wide range of frugality. There's a wide range of decisions to make.
Right.
Based, obviously, if you eat out, you're going to be spending a lot more. A Catholic friend who, I think at the time he had 10 kids. He's got double-digit children. He would talk about his childhood. He was one of 12 kids, I think. And basically, just like in school, how they have a monthly menu, their home would have a menu of what they're eating every single day for the week, and they would budget accordingly. They go one time to the market and get all the ingredients. And when mealtime came, if you're one of the kids that doesn't like broccoli or whatever's on the menu, like, you just don't eat that night. Now they had more than broccoli, I'm sure, but it's like they don't conform to your taste. Now, what I've noticed, I'm guilty of it, my wife, and I've noticed maybe in Korea people are as well, of kind of coddling your kids. That's not a good habit, because you end up wasting lots of food. You end up spending probably more money because you're going to buy who knows what, right, just to accommodate each meal. And I have to admit, like, that's kind of our guilty pleasure, Alina and I. We love to just eat what we want to eat, and sometimes, for a long stretch, we'll be ordering out a lot. And like, if you look at the budget, man, it's crazy what percent of our budget just goes to food. So speaking of budget, I want to kind of mention a principle that if you expand, let's say, a bubble, stuff will go into that bubble to fill it. And I know that's obvious, but I guess the point is this. Like, if you make incremental increases in salary, let's put it this way, or let's say even a dramatic increase in your available income, disposable income, human nature is to raise your standard of living accordingly. So the more you make, the more you spend. The less you make, the less you spend, right? And you adapt up or down. The point here is that people get used to their lives. And that's kind of going back to the reason why money doesn't bring happiness, which is a cliche, but it's true. Is because rich people, they're used to their standard of living. If anything, they have raised it so that it's actually harder and harder to meet that because they're so used to having the best of everything, right? It's like, you've heard this saying before, on a rare occasion you get to ride first class in an airplane or on a KTX, like, it ruins you because you're so, now you can't go back. You can't go back to sitting with the economy class, right? It's just not as nice, obviously. So that principle of filling in the bubble, I experienced that to be true. When we don't budget, which we don't, that's another confession. We just kind of go by feel. That's actually a really big problem, I think, long term for us.
Right.
We don't budget. So I know that if I make more, which incrementally I have over the years, we're just going to end up spending more to meet, to basically like be within our means, but just barely so.
But the problem is the increase in your expenditure is exponential compared to the raise in your salary most of the time.
It can be.
Because it's not about the one extra serving that you purchased thanks to your raise, but it's more about the mentality that, I'm making more money, so we can buy more than we normally did. Right. You hear news about people winning the lottery, but then after about 6 months, they're all in the same place, or even in many cases worse off than they began with.
Let me talk about savings, because I struggle with this myself. Typically when you're trying to change your spending habits, you'll start with little things like coffee. I remember I used to buy coffee every morning as a habit, and then we which I tried to do the instant coffee, which was cheaper per cup, but didn't taste as good. And I think for a while I did that or whatever. And the reason why I bring this up is when I think big picture, I feel like I'm just doing that to psychologically feel like I'm doing something positive, where the real things that affect your long-term financial outlook are the big investments that you make, whether it's a house, a car, things like that.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, you're not doing those kind of investments every day, not even that often, but those are so important that I feel like you got to really kind of manage money well in those cases, and those are the things that really impact you. So ironically, when I think of it that way, it's those big ticket things that end up ultimately affecting, your bottom line. It discourages me from caring so much about the little things, because it's a lot of effort to do something as small as not have that coffee if you're really used to it. I can empathize with people who need that coffee.
Exactly.
So yeah, that's just that's the current struggle. I'll just put that out there. The topic of investments. So this is another confession, but let me ask you, Jakin, have you ever invested in something like real estate, different forms of currency, cryptocurrency, commodities, etc.?
No, I have never done so. I'm not proud of it, but I'm not ashamed of it. Because in my limited experience, I've met many people who have been experienced and interested in investing in stocks, funds, and whatever financial products that they offer, including real estate. And the thing is, I never really thought that the lives of those people were any more rewarding than mine, who was at the time very illiterate in terms of finance. Now, I could be totally wrong here because I've never really gone that length, but when people go to a gathering and they bring up conversation about how the stock market is doing, and it's usually, more often than not doing so well, I don't feel any admiration for the person who knows so much about the stock market. All I feel is pity and disinterest. Even though this person is laying out all these facts and all these things that I don't know, that he's learned during his experience investing in the stock market. Now, real estate is a little different because it's more major, so you don't have to spend your nights looking at a screen to do real estate. I don't know, maybe there are places where you need to. But real estate is more realistic because it's housing, and people take housing much more seriously. With the stock market, people might choose to invest a whole chunk of their savings on it, just in hopes to getting higher rewards. But for real estate, people have to do much more research, studying, and keeping up with the times. So me, no. The short answer is no, I've never done any sort of investments before, and I'm not proud that I was illiterate financially, but I'm not ashamed that I didn't become one of those people spending nights up in front of a screen stressing out that my $1,000 has been cut in half.
Yeah. I share your pity or something toward people who talked about stocks. The whole financial services sector, and I say services very loosely, that is the dominant industry in the U.S. We're all familiar with the financial crisis in 2008 and what was revealed by that crisis, which was basically unbridled greed and deception and exploitation of people, right? I don't really have much to say for those who make money into just a tool to manipulate people for their own benefit, right? Having said that, I thought it was very interesting that Patrick Bet-David did a short 10-minute interview about money. It was just about money, and he's very wealthy. So if you want to learn from someone who's been there, done that, he's one of them. He talks about money as a game, and he says how just like a board game, you've probably played Monopoly. Have you not before?
Yeah.
Okay,
Not
so
well, but
okay, so essentially, it doesn't even have to be a game about acquiring real estate like Monopoly, but just any game, there are rules, and you can get better at it through just trial and error, right? Through repetition, you can start to see strategy. Well, I've heard this from many people, and so I believe it to be true. I just have never really thrown myself into it to try to like, all right, just I've never had the ambition, I guess, to get good at this game of money. But I do believe that it is a game, meaning not that it's some kind of like, not that the consequences are trivial, but in the sense that there are certain principles that if you learn and get good at, you can create wealth, a lot of it, right? For most people, there's a term, the rat race. Most people are just trained or raised or whatever, brainwashed to think that yes, that money is simply, something you have to earn through hard labor and through work, and it's very active. But then,
and it's the results and the reward of years of schooling, which doesn't teach anything about finances.
Yeah, I'm hoping that whole thing goes down soon. We can talk about education and how that's been actually it's been very intentional to not train people to think independently and not train them to create wealth on their own. But going back to what I was saying about income, like active income versus passive income. So passive income is essentially what comes from good investments or from having something that is obviously like operating on its own, right? So that's what I mean by kind of the principle. And Patrick Bet-David talks about doubling. So he always looks for ways to double his money, and obviously who wouldn't, but the question is, what is a good investment, what's not? That's the art of kind of discerning, right? And then there's also negotiation, of course. You may have heard it said before, like in real estate, you don't make money from selling, you make money when you buy. So it's like you got to negotiate a price that's low enough where you can guarantee that you're going to profit after you've done your renovations and repairs, etc., to the house. We were just talking about real estate in Korea. Pretty much in Korea, in certain spots, if you can just get your name on that property, and then hold it, you're gonna make money, right? Or at least that's what the evidence has shown for many years. So, so I just want to put that out there that I know that it's a skill. Making money is a skill, just like anything else. And most people, I guess the opportunity is in the fact that most people just don't know the rules. They're just content to kind of make it, week to week, month to month, through their own labor. And to be honest, my father is an example of a person who found a job that he enjoyed, was easy enough for him. He did it for like 30, 40 years and retired, had a decent amount saved up. He lives comfortably. He's not wealthy, but he's definitely comfortable. So, I'm not saying that there's one way to do it, but I guess I want to transition real quickly before I forget about like what is wealth, what is income. This whole linear idea of thinking of money as just what's your salary or what's your hourly rate, that started to change for me after marriage, after meeting my wife, because what I've learned is, and then having kids, like, if you just think about your net worth, so to speak, your assets, okay, it's not just cash, it's not just your job, it's the value of everything around you. And what I've found is, my wife is very gifted with relationships. I feel she's able to connect with people very deeply and very quickly. And a lot of it, I think, from my observation, is rooted in her generosity and in her honesty and her candor about her weaknesses, about our family problems, whatever. But she's a very thoughtful person, very generous person. And what I've noticed over the years is, I can't put a numerical number on it, but we've just received so much in the way of gifts or resources or hand-me-downs with clothes or, just experiences with trips, or like people offering their homes. And when we went to Florida, she has a friend who lives in Orlando, so we stayed there when we went to Disneyland. All these things would normally cost money. But through the relationships that we have, mainly through my wife, who's better than I am at that, admittedly, like I feel like we're rich in a way, like we've financially even benefited. And so I guess the principle here is like, give generously, and it does tend to come back around. Be real as a person, like develop real relationships. Don't be fake. Don't exploit people, and things tend to kind of work themselves out. So that's something I'm experiencing right now, and so it's changed my view of money in the sense of like I don't feel this burden I mean, certainly I do worry still, and I do think about how am I going to support my family. I'm still the primary breadwinner for now. My wife may end up being some kind of entrepreneur if we go back to the States. But having said all that, I'm worrying less about starving on the street because I know there is, if need be, if worse comes to worse, we're doing all that we can. Like, there's a safety net, which is the people around us, the people that care for us, friends and family, who, they'll support us. And because they know we do the same thing for them.
And even Robert Kiyosaki said, in order to make money or get money, you need to give first. And it's also true for investments, right? That's an obvious thing.
As much as I hate the financial sector because of the fact that they exploit people and they're just out for a buck, I respect those who create value, specifically the people who, inventors of products and services. To me, that's the heart of capitalism. Maybe we can transition into that a little bit. The whole idea that in a free market, consumers are free to use and trade, essentially. That's what it is, right? We're trading goods, money, currency for goods and services. And those who create value, or at least a perception of value that people are willing to pay for, they deserve. That's a free will transaction, And if you can come up with something where enough people want what you're offering, you can build wealth that way. But you're not building it through manipulation, you're building it through adding something of value to people, to a society, to the world, now that they like. Now, but what about the fact that like Emart in Korea, or there's so many conglomerates that dominate and make it so hard for mom and pops? I think, and this is true in America too, with Google, Amazon, Apple, etc. I think that's more of a result of big government. I mean, they've become disproportionately powerful because big government supports them through policy, legislature, that then makes it basically an unfair game. So the problem is not actually the system of capitalism and free trade and free markets, but it's when there's too much power concentrated in these companies because they're in line with the government supports them and provides loopholes or what have you. For them to essentially kind of price out everyone else, right? Well, not to mention, speaking of pricing out, there's a documentary years ago I saw about Walmart and how their prices are low. Why? Because they're essentially exploiting like cheap Southeast Asian labor, So that's just the reality we live in. Now, there should be regulations on those kind of things, I believe. Other than that, those kind of human rights issues, I'm all for free trade, man. Like, don't let the state interfere. Let's encourage innovation.
Yeah, definitely. I'm one of those people who, even though I'm not currently anywhere in the wealthy class in capitalism, I don't condemn capitalism. I just want to see where I can fit or what I'm capable of. So, bringing it back down to the personal level, individual level, the problem that I only recently realized. Now, when you hear about all these entrepreneurs who make it really big in this world, like even including YouTubers, young business startups, you hear about all these inspiring stories of people in their late teens or early 20s realizing something about money, or realizing their calling or their dreams or their passion, and then becoming big by the time they're in their late 20s or even their early 30s. And usually when I hear those stories, I feel I'm a late bloomer because I'm in my late 30s now and I've only recently learned how to be financially literate. I still am not, but I am learning. And the thing that I realized first, which I think is very common among educated people in this world right now, regardless of what country you're in, because first of all, like I mentioned earlier, schooling does not teach us to be financially literate, and I can't really blame the school system for that. A lot of people out there would like to trash the school system, that they don't really teach us the necessary practical skills to survive in this world, but school is a generic series of theories and experiments that are handing us the basic tools that we can use to create our own. I don't feel like it's the schools or the education system's responsibility to teach us how to be financially literate, because face it, if we were all financially literate, no business would prosper as much as they do. Think of it this way, if we are really all very willpowered people and we all do such a good job at staying diligent, awake, getting up really early in the morning, working out, keeping our life healthy, how would gyms make money? Gyms make money because individuals who fail to maintain their shape or their health on their own go to the gyms in hopes of getting that motivation or seeking help through trainers to become that fit person that they want to be. But if everyone's already fit, how do gyms make money? Likewise, if everyone was financially literate, how would businesses prosper by selling products to people? Like Jim mentioned earlier, this whole world is like a game. In the financial game, the giants will always win against the individuals, trying to stay on the personal level. So our main goal, now we can't belittle the people who are working 9-to-5 jobs or are living on a paycheck, because that is difficult to attain, even for me. But what I'm trying to say is, if we rely on a 9-to-5 job, we will never be able to actually purchase the house of our dreams or live the financially free lifestyle that we dream of, just spending our afternoons chilling by the beach with a margarita in our hands. That's just a dream that is never going to come. And every time you talk to people about dreams, I don't know about the States, but in Korea, the most common thing that people will say is that, oh, I'll work harder and make more money. Think about it. What company actually rewards hard workers? If you decide to work really hard, do the companies reward you immediately for the hard work that you put in? And even if they do offer a raise, how much do they truly pay you? How much do they truly raise you? So our goal, you need to somehow find a way to turn your active income into portfolio income. I'm not saying that we should all go into stocks. We can at least seek advice from people who know him well, so that we don't have to spend our nights up looking at the screen, worrying about our investments. Somehow turn them into portfolio income, so that you put a certain amount in and they will continuously spit out some that's just enough for you to get by without digging into your paychecks. And once you have established a certain amount, you must use your brain, use your ideas, whatever you're good at and what you can offer to this world, and turn that into passive income. Passive income should, in most cases, be our ultimate goal. The form of income that generates itself without you having to go into work every day. Meanwhile, you can spend your time traveling, doing whatever you've always wanted to do. Now, we've heard about these famous celebrities, even in Korea. A famous singer and composer, he makes an average of 50,000 US dollars monthly without even having to lift a finger, because of all the karaoke noraebang selections that he receives on his songs and the royalties he receives from those noraebangs. That all adds up to 50,000 US dollars. But that's not it. He's got a lot of other labels and copyright material that he's getting off, so he's got a pretty secure level of passive income. So the lesson that I have learned recently is that even if you have a secure job at a major company that pays you an average that's much higher than the entire workforce, don't think that that's going to be the end of everything, that your life is just set ahead of you. You have to still find a way to turn that into passive income, because major corporations especially, your professional life will be short. There's only a handful of positions you can get into the board of directors. And unless you stand out among hundreds of your colleagues, chances are you're more likely to lose your job before you reach that level. From then on, you're left to survive on your own wits. But if you've spent the past 20 to 30 years of your life doing one task for one company, or the same task for several companies, when you're out on your own to find your own thing and no other company is willing to hire you anymore, which is especially true in Korea. Nowadays, people retire in their late 40s or early 50s because there's a limited amount of jobs available to people, and there's such a huge population, so people are forced to retire early. Now, these people in their late 40s, early 50s, or even mid 50s are suddenly left to care for themselves, but ironically, when you're in your 40s and 50s, that is a time when your family needs the most. Your kids go off to college, you need to buy a new car, you can't live in a small house anymore because your kids have grown up and they need their privacy. Things that you never thought. You start taking out loans, and then the minute you start taking out loans, you no longer work for yourself. You work for everyone else but yourself. As Robert Kiyosaki wrote in his book, now I know there's controversy surrounding the integrity of Kiyosaki, but I actually believe in much of the words that he wrote in his book. Too many people spend their lives working for someone else's dreams, and that is a fact. Because you work your ass off for an entire month, before you even get to see your paycheck, what happens? The government takes taxes off your paycheck, and then your banks, credit card companies take the money out, and then what's remaining is yours. And when you're done paying for your living costs and your bills and your kids' education, what is left for you? It's the same grind, which is why we call it a rat race. You're going nowhere even though you're running at full speed. Now, I am currently one of those people. I am poor class. And I am trying to find a way to get myself to a decent level where I can start generating portfolio or even a little bit of passive income, which however that may be. But even if you have somehow come up with a pipeline to you that generates income, don't settle for one. Many major corporations who have already made it big never just settle for that one business that they're successful in. They continuously expand into different areas. The reason is there's no knowing when that one success that you have made is no longer going to be valid. Pretty soon you'll have competition. Somebody's going to come up with a better idea of make an improvement off of your idea and sell it at a much cheaper price. You're going to have to continuously search for new pipelines that generate income towards you.
Yeah, let me go back to what you mentioned about the gyms. when I did go to a gym, I see a lot of people who are pretty fit. So it's a thought experiment is what we're bringing up. Like, what if everyone was fit with gyms go out of business? I'm not sure that's true, but I definitely agree that there will always be people that try to exploit desperation and need. This is why the diet industry is so huge, because so many people want to lose weight, right? They're selling a dream, and the dream may actually contain good information, but for most people it just doesn't work because they don't have the right mindset, or they don't have the right habits or whatever. And I think that's actually what I want to talk about next, which is you just mentioned like how companies will continue expanding for fear of competition or to maintain their edge. I think that's definitely true, but I also think that on an individual level, I've noticed that the people who are wealthy enough to basically stop doing everything and go sit on the beach and drink their margarita, they don't do that, because what got them to the point where they can be independent is what keeps them going even after they're financially independent. Meaning, they didn't do it for the money. They did it because they're passionate about whatever it is that they're in. Okay? Tim Ferriss, his first book was about gaining independent wealth, or one of his first books, The 4-Hour Workweek, right? But he's since then done all kinds of different things, written books on health. He's done, I don't know how many hundreds of podcasts at this point with different experts. His passion is actually deconstructing the habits and the methods of world-class performers, right? He doesn't have to do that for money. I don't think he even is. He gives away a lot of his stuff for free. So to me, I think that what keeps him going is what got him there in the first place. Again, I think the people who are obsessed with money and obsessed with making money because of this dream of somehow being free to just relax,
Right.
that mindset will fail the vast majority of the time because the focus is on the wrong thing. Like, you're not going to stay motivated enough because it's going to be hard that way. If you're focused on doing something that you're passionate about, but then also that you're good at, that's the thing. You have to actually be good at it. I mean, there's no two ways about it. You can develop your skills and get better, but I could be passionate all I want to play in the NBA. I'm never going to make it. I just don't have that skill set, right? I never will. Be realistic, like you mentioned about budgeting. Be realistic about your goals and your abilities, okay? The Bible's true. It's not that money is the root of all evil. It's the love of money, right? You cannot serve both God and mammon, or basically God and money. Maybe that's why I've never been ambitious. I'm not saying it's a great thing to like not care about money, like, and not budget. I think I should. It's a problem. But I just never have been motivated to start a business just to make money. People have told me for years now, like with my credentials and education, blah blah blah. I could just milk it, and I'm sure that's probably true. But I just don't have the motivation because it's just not in me to just try to milk it, I guess. Maybe I should have a little more of that, to be honest.
Well, which leads us to the opening question that we had. Like, if you
Why
had...
were you laughing, by the way? For the camera.
Looking at you fidgeting, and the result of your fidgeting.
The butterfly? The butterfly?
You have two cell phones in front of you.
Yes.
You've been fiddling with one of them, and
Yes.
you actually dropped one, and then now it's got to a point where you took the case off one of them and created this. And I just started thinking about, I wonder how much of that sound went into the microphone that's right here. I wonder if we're gonna find that during our conversation, something's gonna be constantly on in the background going like. And it's just like I dropped my pencil a while ago, and I'm like, we're just both sitting here fiddling while we're talking, which is very natural, a natural way of dialogue. And dialogue indeed is what this channel is all about. So what you just said actually brings us to the conclusion and the answer to the opening question: health versus money. It's more about. We have testimonies from several billionaires who said that they had gone into depression and also flirted with the idea of suicide because they were so jealous of the people who were multi-billionaires. Now, if you're a billionaire, you're pretty much set for the rest of your life. You can do anything you want, go anywhere you want, meet anyone you want, eat anything you want. You can pretty much own most of this world if you're a billionaire. In terms of lifestyle, you can pretty much... But what reason does a billionaire have to be depressed? Because they're jealous of multi-billionaires. And that's what happens if money becomes your main focus. Now, if you're doing what you love and that happens to become of great monetary value and you make millions off of it, good for you. I'm glad your dream paid out. And some of us might not be so lucky. Some of us might be living our dream, but it might not be translating into monetary value. But the thing is, if you ask someone who is living their dream and ask them if they have a wish, they'll pretty much say, I just wish I could maintain the status quo. There's nothing more I can hope for. Even if they're not rich per se. But you often hear stories of rich and famous people committing suicide because of relationships or jealousy, depression, loneliness, which is proof that money can't give you happiness. Money can buy things that might lead to happiness or short-term, hedonistic
Get
happiness.
used to it. You just get used to it. That's why it doesn't last.
Right. So like if I bought an economy ticket, they bumped me up to first class, I would think I'm so lucky because I would never have dreamt of flying first class, especially not on my own budget. But I paid for an economy ticket and they gave me first class. I'd be so thrilled. I'd be taking selfies throughout the entire flight to keep a record of that. But what if you flew first class every time? Everywhere you went, what if you flew first class? Would it feel as special to you? Imagine when you were little and your parents gave you $1 that was capable of getting you maybe 1 or 2 pieces of candy that you really liked. That made you really happy, right? But then you got a little older and candy was not enough anymore. Now you needed comic books. You needed to go to the arcade room. Now $1 was not enough, you needed $10. So when your parents gave you $20, that made you happy. But when your parents gave you $1, that actually made you sulk, right? What used to make you so happy when you were younger, now makes you sulk. So as you grow older, you start making your own money, and you start getting paid $5,000 a month on your job. If somebody gave you 10 bucks, how much would that mean to you? You see where I'm getting at. The more you get, the more you crave.
Let me quote Tony Robbins, who said, money doesn't make you anything but more than what you already were. So if you were a greedy poor person, you'll be a greedy rich person. If you were a selfish poor person, you'll be a selfish rich person. And vice versa, with generosity, okay?
If you're a greedy poor person, you'll be a greedy rich person who thinks he's poor because he's thinking about the people who are richer than him.
Oh, here's my point about Korea. So, I just want to throw a plug out there to have babies, alright? Listen, I'm not saying this as a joke. The fertility rate we know is really low, but the excuse I always hear, Koreans hesitate to marry and have children because they think that the economy is so bad they can't get a job, blah, blah, blah. I understand the economy is bad. Getting jobs is hard. But listen, you're still enjoying the benefits or the pleasure of child making. Let's just put it that way. I think that's a cop-out. I think that for the sake of country, God says be fruitful and multiply. And he doesn't say, like, he doesn't mention budgeting or worrying about making ends meet. Necessity is a great motivator for making ends meet.
Right.
If you have kids, look, people will rally around you, all right? When we had kids, my kids right here in front of the camera right now, It brought so much joy to the family. It brings the family together.
Yeah.
Don't think of it just as a financial transaction. Get married, have kids, and just live life. Like, that's what we're meant to do. We're at a point where in 30 years, Korea's could be a bunch of old people with no youth and no labor force to support it. So we don't want that to happen. I mean, the world, not just Korea. I mean, a lot of first world countries actually are experiencing very low fertility rates. So I don't know how I got quite on that big of a tangent, but it irks me to hear money as the reason, as the culprit, as the excuse for just not living life.
Like I mentioned earlier that whenever I hear people talking about how they're losing money in the stock market, and you can just tell by the way they're talking about this that they're so proud of how much they know about the market, and it just feels like humble bragging when they say, oh, I put $1,000 into this, but it's not going well. They're actually humble bragging. They're just telling you, look, I know a lot about the stock market. I've been there, I've done this, and I'm really advanced. But like I said, I have no admiration for those people. Likewise, whenever I hear people say that they don't want to get married or have children because of the living costs and the economy, that just sounds like a bunch of bullshit to me. You know, if a person said, no, I just prefer not to have kids because I want to be free, I just want to enjoy my life, and I don't want to be tied down to one place for their education and stuff. I just want to spend all my money to myself and enjoy. Maybe if I have a partner to enjoy the time with me, I'll spend all our money traveling the world and doing stuff. We don't want to be rich, but we don't want to be tied down by children. That's more honest, and I can respect that. But if people start saying things like, oh, because of the economy right now, come on, the economy changes all the time. The stock markets change all the time. You can't say that just because what you're going through right now is going to last you forever. That just sounds very short-sighted. Those people I have no admiration for. Now, many of you can agree with us on this, that when you talk to people and when you converse with people, you can get a hint of what kind of person they are. You can size them up and you can feel, oh, this person is respect-worthy or this person's full of shit. Usually, in my experience, people who like to talk about the stock market at gatherings and people who say that money is the reason they're not getting married or having kids, I have no respect for them. So far in my experience, I had no respect for those people. I know a person that I really respect. He has no kids with his wife, and he actually came out and admitted. When they got married, they agreed that they will not have kids. They have their own reasons, and I thought to myself, look, I don't personally agree with those reasons, but I can respect that you do. I'm glad that you didn't say money was the reason you didn't want to have kids.
I didn't know that we both felt so strongly about that, Jaden, but I'm glad we did mention it here.
We have talked about it in the past. It's like saying, I don't have time, right? Yeah. Time is what you make of it.
Correct. Time is your priority. Whatever you prioritize, you make time for it. Mm-hmm. Well, look, this has been a pretty full session today. We even touched on some things like capitalism and education that we could talk about in future episodes. Mm-hmm. Maybe we'll start getting some guests soon enough. So
I'm pretty satisfied with the things that we discussed today, especially on the personal level. And I'm pretty sure while we're editing this, we're going to come up with new things we should have said. But that's what future episodes are for.
Yep.
So in the meantime, as always, thank you for watching, and
nice job. See you when I see you.
Sooner rather than later.